Hello and welcome to Stuff They Should Have Taught You in School, and I'm your host, of course, Monsui. A quick thank you to all listeners and subscribers out there, and I looked at the stats and there's people in even more countries listening to this, so hopefully today's topic will be a bit more universal, as I know I have mentioned things that are specific to the UK where I currently live. I've mentioned that in previous episodes, so if you're new here as well, an extra thank you to you, and if you are an existing subscriber or listener and you've come back once again, as an extra thank you to you. Anyway, a disclosure, these are done in one take, so there may be things this and that happening. So anyway, let's get on with it. What I learned from owning my first car. So if you've listened to a couple of my other episodes, you probably know that basically I bought my first car, and it was very much an emotional decision rather than a logical decision, and it was a mistake. However, I do not regret it. However, because it taught me a lot, and not just about cars in general, but more about problem solving, and the mindset behind that, knowing the right questions to ask, which I think is the hardest part, rather than just saying, the facts of any specific situation. It's more the mindset behind it that allows you to ask the right questions and therefore then get the right answers, which will then, through all these questions you eventually ask, will then piece it together, which will give you a more towards yes or more towards no, or a slightly grey solution, which you would see as being the best solution given the information that you had. So I'll give you a bit of background on the first car I owned. This was a Mark IV Golf. It was a 2001 Volkswagen Golf, and it was a decent car. It had low mileage, 70,000 miles. I didn't know anything about cars at the time, so I didn't even Google, which is what you should have Googled, how to go and buy a used car or something like that. And it's the same thing for anything: how to buy a phone, how to buy a MacBook, how to build a desk. I don't know, how to negotiate a deal, how to negotiate a pay rise. I never Googled anything first, so the first thing is obviously, Google it, use Google, and know the right questions to ask. So the right question in this circumstance would be how to check a used car. And even though that I bought this from a dealership, a second-hand dealership, they did screw me over, because I came back later on, and I kept telling them that, my coolant keeps saying coolant low, stop the car. So the guy basically told me fill it up with tap water, which is indicated two things. Is that one, that problem was there, or indicated a couple of things. Is one, that problem was there when I bought the car, and two, this guy is basically telling me to put tap water in, whereas if it goes below 0, that's obviously going to freeze, and it's going to freeze the pipework inside the car. So that was the first problem of all the problems. I don't really want to get into the problems, but this shows how the people selling you the car may do some weird things. And it happened to a friend of mine recently as well. She was sold a car, and the clutch was going out, even though it had a 3-month warranty, and luckily she spoke. This leads me on to my next point, which is get a second opinion. Luckily then she spoke to another friend of mine who was a mechanic, and he said, look, your clutch is going, you need to go back and get a replacement clutch. So that's good. In general, you do want a second opinion, especially if you're looking at something that you don't know about yourself. A new industry, a new area, something that is new to you, is always worth getting a second opinion. And even if you don't know someone directly or indirectly, and you can't speak to someone face to face, you can still Google these things. Like, for example, if I was looking at buying stocks in a certain company, I can Google, is this company a good investment? I can Google and find historical data on that. And that is, research, getting second opinion on something. And with regards to cars, you could Google, which is what I should have done and did after that, is the car that you're looking to buy, and then common problems. So then if I did that, I would have realised that the Golf had a lot of common problems, whereas if I had Googled Honda Civic common problems, there'd be a lot less common problems. And in fact, I have done this, and the common problems from some of the Hondas out there are just things that are like, the timing belt goes or something like that, which is consumable parts that will go anyway. Whereas the coolant going wrong, or the, other bits and pieces, the ignition barrel went, the airbag went, the O2 sensor went. Some of these are consumable, some of them are not. Some of them shouldn't have gone. The coolant definitely not. And another thing to reiterate, getting a second opinion, is that you could get a second, third, fourth, fifth opinion, and then at the end of the day, it's still down to you. It's still down to your decision based on the data that you have. Now, there was a point where I was told by Volkswagen themselves, and another point where I was told by a guy who owned several of that same car, including one which he had spent thousands of pounds into and turned it into a quote-unquote show car, which I assume basically means that he's put loads of unnecessary parts on it to make it look good, even though it is not that great of a car in general, and a lot of people are going to hate on me for that, and I don't care because I think it's a shit car for the most part. There are some good parts about it. In fact, after I bought that car, my friend bought two of them. A Volkswagen Golf GTI, which had a bigger engine, and then a Volkswagen Golf VR6, which had an even bigger engine. And then we all realised that these cars are just not the right ones. Anyway, a bit of a tangent there. But here we go. You see people that have owned these cars, people that are supposedly much more experienced, Volkswagen themselves, the actual company, telling me it cannot be done. They don't know how. Whether they just don't know how to do it, or they can't be bothered to figure it out. Well, you can figure it out. You can use other things and other people to figure it out. And sometimes you may want to, for this instance, use someone who's not from Volkswagen, but who knows loads of different cars. For example, a breakdown person. They might see loads of different cars. You might have to call them out once or twice, get the right person to ask the right question. So, second opinions are great, but they're not the end of it. And research is great, but it's not the end of it. You want to Google everything you can, ask the right questions. But when you come down to making the decision, it's down to you. And no matter how much data you have, no matter how much research you've done, no matter how many people you've spoken to, it will almost come down to what feels like a hunch decision. And this leads me on to thinking about, okay, are we looking at this from an emotional point of view or a logical point of view? And we can't exactly get all the way to one side or all the way to the other side. It's more grey. We want to look more towards logical for the most part. Some things for like fun stuff, maybe yes, you will look more emotional. I bought this car on emotions. I looked at the car and I said, this looks good. I think this car looks good. But is it good? No. Well, that's arguable, isn't it? But that's the emotional side of things. And I could have and should have waited. If nothing else, just wait it out and see what happens. But I didn't. I was naive, and I wanted to just pass my driving license, and I really wanted to get a car. So I ended up buying the wrong one, even though I bought it from a dealer. So how do we go more from emotional decisions to logical decisions? Now, there's a couple of things that really hold us back on this, or are restraints on this. Is yes, you can go and do your research. Yes, you can go and talk to people, and you can come up with the facts. But we are subject to our own biases. So if you emotionally want an item like the car, you will look more towards things that back that up. Confirmation bias. And you, however much you don't want this to happen, you will be influenced by past decisions and past, whatever's happened in the past. So by becoming aware of our own biases, we can start to pull it apart and really say, well, okay, why? Okay, dig down deeper. Why? And this is sort of the point here, is that, look, this is what happened when I bought my first car, but this happens all the time. You have a decision, an investment to make. You want to, break up or with a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and you are debating, ping-ponging back and forth. Or it might be even more serious than that. It may even be more like, should I buy this house? Should I move into this neighborhood? Should I move my whole family and move into this new neighborhood? Or should I leave my job and start a business? And, these are serious questions. If you find yourself ping-ponging back and forth, I did hear a good 4-step system to making a good decision. And remember that we are always subject to our own biases, which is very important to know, because then you can pull yourself out of it. If you know it's happening, you can pull yourself out of it. If you don't know it's happening, then you just think you're making the right decision without the right information. So I actually learned this from Alex Hormozi, which is a podcast I listened to today, and he basically said, look, if you're ping-ponging back and forth, that's a red flag on the decision. And what we need to do is to make a good decision. We need 4 things. We need to have a good night's sleep and be well rested. We need to have some food in our belly and be well fed. We need to remove ourselves from the normal environment. Okay, so this I'm going to go do a quick tangent on, because your brain gets used to what you do, where you do it. So, for example, if you should eat at the dinner table and sleep in the bed. If you mix those up, your brain gets a bit confused. And then when you're going to sleep, your brain doesn't know whether you're going for sleep or eat. But if you always train your brain, okay, bed is for sleep, no phones there, nothing. We just get in bed and we go to sleep. Then the brain knows it's for the sleep. So when you're in your normal environment, your brain has those biases, those past biases. So if you're at your desk, it's going to have those past biases of all the work that you've done, or maybe not the work you've done, or, so you want to try and remove yourself from that environment, the physical environment, somewhere new, somewhere fresh, where your brain hasn't already got previous biases on that. And then you want to operate from a place of not wanting or needing anything. Now this is interesting. So if you say to yourself, okay, where I am right now is perfect. I don't need anything extra and I don't want anything extra. I have everything I could ever want. When I make this decision now, it's incredibly logical. If I think, okay, I don't need anything and I don't want anything, so why would I do this? And this is, and I'll recap those 4 steps. And again, I'll mention that this is from Alex Hormozi, who was actually recommended to me from a friend of mine. And this guy has got some brilliant, I'm not sponsored by him, I don't know him or anything, but he has got some brilliant podcast episodes and brilliant sayings. But to make a good decision, good night's sleep, well fed, remove yourself from the physical environment, the normal physical environment, and then try and make a decision from coming from a place where you don't need anything and you don't want anything. Okay, my final point on what I learned from owning my first car is to sharpen the tools, sharpen your skills. And you can practice these things. So in this instance, if I was looking for a car, maybe I should have gone and seen 5-6 other cars beforehand. maybe not even with the intention to buy, but just the intention to practice looking at them and practice understanding. And in fact, I went to go and look at a car fairly recently, a few months ago, and I said to myself, and I said to the person I was with, I said to them, listen, I'm going to want this car. I know I'm going to want this car. Even if there's 100 reasons why I shouldn't buy it, I'm still going to want it. And I'd said that for two reasons. It's one, for them to sort of back me up and keep me accountable for that, but also for me to say to myself and out loud, listen, you're going to want this. Even if you find a 10 or 20 oil leaks, all this red flags, you're still going to want it. So why? We are subject to our own biases. We make decisions on an emotional basis. Day to day, everything is pretty much emotional, is on emotional decisions. We want this, we want that. We want it now. So how do we sharpen the tools? In any instance that you have, like whatever it is, whatever you're looking to do, is there a way that we can practice it without the implications and sharpen the skills, sharpen the tools? And I think that is about it. I will recap quickly. What did I learn from owning my first car? I learned about doing your research, about getting a second opinion, about Googling things, but knowing what questions are the right questions to ask. I learned that we are subject to our own biases when we are making decisions. And I learned that we mainly make emotional rather than logical decisions. And it's hard to make a logical decision. It requires a lot more effort to make a logical decision, and especially with the biases, that makes it even harder. And I also learned to sharpen your tools, and I'll leave you with a quote that is, which I'm paraphrasing heavily, but if you gave me 10 hours to chop down a tree, I will spend the first 6 or 8 hours sharpening the axe. Thank you for listening. You've been listening to stuff that should have taught you in school. I was your host, of course, Bonsui. If you're listening but not subscribed, please consider subscribing. Please consider leaving a review or sharing it if you found it interesting or useful. I hope you did. I hope you got some value off it, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.